Hello there beautiful human, my name is RidersDX, welcome to my channel, but today we're going to review a Spongebob game. But I have no idea what game it is because I have no concept of time and can't plan ahead. So yeah, let's go ahead into my comment section and take a look at what games you all want me to review. Oh, let's review the iconic Employee of the Month. So this game...
Not so fast.
Chester?
No, it is I, the Flying Dutchman.
With an Australian accent?
Yes, with an Australian accent. Anyway, you will not be touching that game today.
What's wrong with Employee of the Month?
Well, nothing actually. It's a big part of my childhood, but no, you will not be touching that game today. You'll be playing Creature from the Krusty Krab.
I would love to review that game, but I gotta be Gary.
And you will not be allowed to leave this apartment until you are done.
Damn it! Why are you doing this?
The better question is, why don't you want to review this game?
It's not that I don't want to review it.
Then why do you ignore all the comments from your audience begging for you to cover this game?
Well, they all love it.
Don't you?
Well, I don't know.
What? How dare you?
I didn't say I hated it.
But you do not love it.
Well, probably not, but I don't think I hate it either.
This is worse than I thought. The delusions in your head have grown to insufferable levels. I will now review this game with you to show you the error of your ways.
You know what though? Sometimes it is just like a burden to carry around the secret distaste I have for what sometimes feels like a national treasure among the licensed video game community. I don't want to be the one to knock down the immense creativity and passion the team behind this game probably had developing it, but sometimes you build up these walls that all make up this metallic dam, and eventually dams get hit, and sometimes when dams get hit, they release all their secrets, and you have to drown in them. So I guess you're my boulder that's hit my dam, and this video will be me drowning in my secret distaste for a beloved game. Sounds like a grand time.
Loser, loser.
I got hot sauce in my bag, swag.
Quick shout out to JoyToon. They drew a couple fan arts of Metal Duckles for me actually, and so I really like these fan arts of Metal Duckles because they have a bit of a cartoonish like tinge to them, and they actually kind of remind me of like things I would see within the Looney Tunes. So I don't know if that's what you were going for, but I really liked it because I used to be a big like Looney Tunes fan and such, and that's like the first thing I thought about when I saw like the expressions of Metal Duckles in these drawings. So thank you so much JoyToon, I really appreciate it. So quite frankly, I don't know where to even start with this game. SpongeBob SquarePants Creature from the Krusty Krab came out after some of the best SpongeBob games in the whole series, such as Battle for Bikini Bottom, the movie game, and Lights Camera Pants. I know when I was a kid, I was really excited when I started seeing promo for this game. This game had some really sick commercials that aired on Nickelodeon, fully CGI animated, which I can't recall ever being done for a SpongeBob game prior to this one. It was definitely hyped up compared to other SpongeBob titles. I just thought the idea of playing as a rampaging Plankton was the coolest idea ever. So I think the best way to break down this game is to talk about the three main characters you play throughout the whole campaign, because otherwise there's a whole bunch of random shit we can go on and on about. So obviously you start off this game playing as SpongeBob, but you don't start off the same way as you did in Battle for Bikini Bottom or the movie game. Instead, SpongeBob morphs into a demonic corpse, a race car driver, and then you actually start the game off with driving. Now, I played the Wii version, so obviously because this game came out, I'm pretty sure with the launch of the Wii, motion controls were slapped onto the experience, especially given that this version was really just a port of the other console versions. Needless to say, the steering controls felt really sensitive when I first played it. I sort of got used to it as I kept going, but it definitely felt like an early Wii title. My main criticism with the racing though is that it's extremely basic. In most racing games, you have multiple methods and strategies in speeding yourself up to get ahead of the pack, whether it be through drifting, items, or shortcuts. But with this level, all you can really do is steer yourself and grab a few boost power-ups and go faster. But beyond that, you're really just going along with the ride, racing through the track 4 separate times. The only difference between each attempt is that you're racing a different opponent, but in In reality, you can't even race that character despite what the game wants you to believe. They're always a good distance ahead of you, just throwing traps in your path trying to slow you down. Honestly, this part of SpongeBob's gameplay just felt like a waste of time to me. It's not unplayable, but really just made me ask, what's the point? It literally just felt like the track was there to pad the game out, and there was no creativity and nothing innovative about this gameplay style. The good thing is the racing mechanic only appears in the first and last level. What really takes up the majority of SpongeBob's gameplay is the platforming. So, if you're familiar with how Battle for Bikini Bottom and the movie game played, you'll get a somewhat similar experience here. He can jump and attack as he did before. He just has some new moves like the extended arm attack and can also activate devices with those amazing motion controls. I have to say though, SpongeBob definitely has a different feel from those other two games. I think one reason for that is the levels. Creature from the Krusty Krab's levels are much tighter and feel more linear as a result. Most of the missions have you going through a predetermined path to collect some sort of item SpongeBob needs to progress through the story. Now, this isn't to say that linear levels are a bad thing. Battle for Bikini Bottom in the movie game were for the most part linear as well. However, those levels also had many nooks and crannies sprinkled into their levels that allowed you to stumble upon hidden collectibles. Battle for Bikini Bottom even took it a step further and didn't require you to go from level to level. You could spend as little or as much time on one level as you like. As long as you had enough golden spatulas, you could move on to the next one. Creature from the Krusty Krab opts for more of what the movie game did, but now its levels are even more linear and closed off, and as a result, the gameplay sometimes comes off as a little boring. SpongeBob's first level is pretty good though. It slowly introduces you to all the different mechanics you can use as SpongeBob, and it's varied enough. It can get on the tedious side sometimes in length, but the level segments never overstay their welcome. The Alaskan Bowworm though, which is SpongeBob's second platforming level, has to be one of my least favorite levels ever to appear in a SpongeBob game. Talk about an aesthetic and gameplay that completely overstays its welcome. The level itself is basically quadrupled in length, and you also don't have the racing sections to break up the pace, so the whole level drags on for even longer. Plus, the level is just ugly. I'm sorry, I don't want to spend what feels like a quarter of the whole game inside an Alaskan bowworm, you know, around all that stomach acid and the people that live inside the Alaskan bowworm. It might have been really funny as like a one-off joke on the show, but to dedicate an entire level to that was just extremely unnecessary. It also truly showed just how bland the platforming in this game was compared to its predecessors, because it was just that long and tedious. I truly understood from playing through this that the level design just isn't that interesting compared to what came before, and it really is a shame because SpongeBob controls pretty well for the most part. It's just the level design is not there, and it really is the main detriment of the platforming here. SpongeBob's platforming sections basically switch you between basic platforming, switch activating, and defeating lots of enemies. It just gets so tedious doing the same things constantly with no room to explore and pursue other objectives. It got bland and stale. Despite taken directly from the previous two platformers, the gameplay here feels extremely uninspired compared to its predecessors, and it took me a while to figure that out because, you know, when I was a kid I did enjoy this, but there was always something about this game that felt very off compared to Battle for Bikini Bottom in the movie game, and now playing it as an adult, I think I finally figured it out why it is I don't love these levels as much as I did with Battle for Bikini Bottom in the movie game, and why I don't usually come back to this game. SpongeBob has one more gameplay style, and that is when he is riding in a rocket. This is extremely simple and there's honestly not too much to say about it. On the Wii, you tilt the remote to move SpongeBob across the screen, and then you press the B button to shoot out some sort of laser to destroy obstacles and enemies. It's on rails, so SpongeBob is moving automatically. There's no way to stop him, but honestly, it's not that challenging anyway, so it really doesn't matter. It just feels like these segments go by so fast that's difficult to let them really sink in, but I actually really enjoyed these sections in comparison to the other two gameplay styles. It was fast-paced and quick, but the gameplay itself was refreshing from everything else the game provided, so I honestly took it at face value as a nice use of the Wii's motion controls. It never overstays its welcome, and it's a nice break from the other gameplay styles. I felt like this was a good way to introduce like something that isn't like the primary gameplay style. It comes in, it comes out, it's not too overwhelming, and it has just enough variety given how long you spend playing this gameplay style in the game. So that's everything you do with SpongeBob for the most part, but now what about Patrick? Patrick actually shares all his gameplay styles with SpongeBob. Patrick has a rocket section that's just like SpongeBob's. It's basically the exact same thing, but it takes place in space, so yeah, it's a weird game. but Patrick's platforming levels are actually pretty great. So you're technically not playing as Patrick, but as his superhero counterpart, Starfish Man. Patrick's first level takes place in this town that looks directly ripped out of the Crimson Chin's universe. It really just gives off this awesome vibe of being a superhero in one of those Saturday morning cartoons and makes the levels so much more fun just because of the way it looks. Patrick also has some slightly different moves from SpongeBob. It's still very much performs certain moves to progress to this section level design mentality, but I think the aesthetic just helps to elevate this level that much more compared to the SpongeBob ones. It's not perfect and the level can still drag on near the end, but I did not feel like it lasted nearly as long as the SpongeBob ones, so it was definitely an improvement. Otherwise, Patrick's gameplay shares a lot of similarities to SpongeBob. I personally would love to see a SpongeBob game get made with this art style. Like, it's just that good. Like, look at it. It could be this awesome setup with SpongeBob and Patrick travel into a Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy comic book. Now that would be a really cool concept for a SpongeBob game. So THQ Nordic, if you take up on that offer, then I would love to get a few royalties here and there. Patrick has another platforming section that's later on in the game, but this level is actually multiple parts of a boss battle. So it's very interesting to say the least. This felt very refreshing as a platforming level, especially since it came a little bit after playing as SpongeBob and the Alaskan Bowworm. It's fast paced and gives you some interesting ways of battling the giant Plankton. It's nothing absolutely amazing, but I really appreciated change in how these types of levels were being handled, especially playing through all the platforming levels with SpongeBob and Patrick beforehand. It just felt like a nice change of pace, and it added a little bit more variety into the game, and so I just wish that they were a little bit more creative with SpongeBob levels like they were with Patrick's, because Patrick's levels just felt very refreshing, and I enjoyed them a lot more than SpongeBob's. The little details can really elevate an experience, and I definitely realized that playing SpongeBob and Patrick's levels back to back. Now, Plankton is definitely the oddball out of the three. As if this game couldn't get any weirder, he's never been playable in a main adventure-oriented SpongeBob game before. He also has two completely different, unique gameplay styles to him from SpongeBob and Patrick. Ironically, both of Plankton's levels don't involve him sneaking around due to his miniature size. He's either regular or enhanced size in each of his levels. I guess the developers couldn't be bothered with injecting like stealth elements, but truth be told, it probably wouldn't fit the whole feel of this game anyway, which is very in your face with its style. So I guess it fits. The first Plankton level is actually a 2.5D side-scroller. Basically, you're running away from a ginormous Krabby Patty trying to eat you alive, so you need to navigate various obstacles to get to the end of the level. This was actually a lot of fun for me when I was a kid. I might have just been really excited at the idea of playing as Plankton in a SpongeBob game, but I thought the platforming was cool and the concept of the level was pretty funny. When I played it again recently, however, I realized I was getting a little bit bored with it by the end of the level, much like I had with the platforming levels of SpongeBob and Patrick. I'm starting to realize that an overall flaw of this game is that when it switches to a certain gameplay style, it tends to overstay its welcome and just make me wish I could move on to the next level. Don't get me wrong, the whole concept of Plankton being chased by a Krabby Patty is pretty hilarious, but I just think the joke wears itself thin 2/5 of the way into the level. It also just gets to the point where the level doesn't offer enough new variables to keep the gameplay interesting. Thankfully, these sections don't last nearly as long as the other platforming levels, so it's not as noticeable here. And I could say the exact same thing about Plankton's second level, although it was even shorter, so it wasn't as noticeable. Now, this gameplay style was promoted really extensively when this game launched. You had that giant Plankton wreaking havoc in so many commercials for this game, and he even makes a prominent appearance on the cover. This was basically what enticed people to check out the game, and I don't blame the marketing team because it's a pretty cool concept. What 10-year-old didn't want to play as a ginormous Plankton walking around Bikini Bottom and smashing everything in sight? It's a great and really cool concept. The actual gameplay, however, was okay. I mean, it's exactly what you think it is. You walk around as a gigantic Plankton and just mash buttons and perform random motion controls to crush everything that's around you. I think what I realized while playing this level was that I love this concept, but maybe more so as an episode of SpongeBob Squarepants. I think if they were ever to expand upon this idea in a TV show, it could be a hilarious horror spoof. But playing the actual game, there just isn't enough variety within the actual level to keep your interest past the first couple sections. It felt more like an enhanced minigame than a fully fleshed out gameplay style. It was more flash than substance and just didn't leave a lasting impression on me. At this point, I feel like I've been repeating myself over and over again in this review and saying that a lot of these gameplay styles just overstay their welcome. And I think the reason this happened is because this game tried to be so many things. It tried to be a racer, a platformer, a horror-infused beat-em-up, a motion control vomit fest. Everything they could have possibly thrown at the wall they did. I suppose this could be a good thing, as variety is always a quality you want video games to have, but this game just took the wrong approach to it by injecting completely different gameplay styles into the package and not spending enough time fleshing them out. The reason Battle for Bikini Bottom in the movie game works so well with sticking primarily to one gameplay style is that while you were platforming the majority of the time, it was the unique level designs and missions that kept your attention throughout the whole game. In Battle for Bikini Bottom, at one point you're running through a carnival defeating robots, but at another point you're sneaking around these scary looking robots in one of the darkest SpongeBob locations ever. Creature from the Krusty Krab is missing that kind of variety in its level designs because it spends too much time trying to come up with completely different gameplay styles to inject into the game. It honestly feels like so much wasted potential and it's disappointing. This is the exact same issue the Sonic series used to have during the adventure era. You had all these different gameplay styles they were trying to simultaneously develop that at the end of the day, none of them were able to reach their maximum potential. It's a shame as I think this game has a lot of cool ideas going for it, but the gameplay is just not where it needs to be.
Alright, I've heard enough.
So I don't think Creature from the Krusty Krab is a terrible game by any means, I just think it has far more potential than what it turned out to be, and that's why it just isn't up there in terms of my favorite SpongeBob games.
I'd change my name if I was you.
I didn't even bash the game though, just didn't have many nice things to say about it. There's a difference.
No, not on the internet.
Well fine, what is it that people love so much about this game anyway? Please enlighten me.
Oh, with more satisfaction than I get from sniffing socks in Davy Jones's locker. I will quickly mention I'm not as obsessed with this game as I was in the introduction. Creature from the Krusty Krab is definitely in my top 3 SpongeBob games, behind Employee of the Month and before the movie game. I played it a lot as a kid, but I'm well aware of many of its issues. But I still do really enjoy the game. Let's get into this. So firstly, yes, the driving in this game is awful. Riders is completely right about that, and for the most part, a lot of his points are completely true. The game does try to do a lot of things at once, and many of the levels and gameplay styles aren't fleshed out enough. The game can seem confused between what it really is. Is it a 3D platformer, a beat 'em up, a racer? And then you have aspects like the Plankton destroying Bikini Bottom levels feel so empty of any depth and just feel like an afterthought. So why do I love this game? And no, it is not for nostalgia. Well, I have 3 main reasons in particular. So number 1, I'm always asking for companies to do more, to do different stuff, especially in the film world, but also when it comes to games. I am so over the endless streams of shooters and games that are perfectly happy with being nothing more than a title in a series. It's why I have a lot of respect for this game, especially taking into account that these are the guys who also made Squarepants, which is an awful game, but at least they tried to do something different with SpongeBob with that. The easy way out would have been to make a 3D platformer like Battle for Bikini Bottom, do nothing original, and get paid. But they didn't. They went out on a limb and created something hugely different. Rather flawed, but something we have never seen done before or since in SpongeBob games, and I love it for that. Number 2, the goddamn music. The soundtrack is next level. I want them to play it at my funeral, alright? Every track. But just the main remixed one is fantastic. Number 3, the last hour of this game makes me think so fondly on it. And in many ways, I think it represents exactly what they were trying to do with this game. As soon as SpongeBob gets out of the worm and all 3 dreams clash, this game reaches a whole other level. Actively combining different gameplay styles in this one main event. Flying around as SpongeBob, avoiding giant plankton as Patrick fights across the rooftops, paired with the amazing soundtrack and art style. I can rarely say this about a SpongeBob game. It honestly reaches epic proportions.
Alright, well, that's all I came to do. See you next year.
Well, I have a lot to think about. This game's potential feels like a never-ending canvas. Just looking at the box art of the game shows just how much it promises to explore. If you compared it side by side to a whole bunch of other SpongeBob games, none of them stand a chance in terms of scope and imagination. And the idea for the game too just seems amazing. Like, it's basically the dream world of Battle for Bikini Bottom, but in its own game. Doesn't that sound like a kick-ass concept? It's definitely something I would love for any team to tackle with SpongeBob again in the future. But there's a caveat to limitless freedom, and that's what you do with it. When you're given such a great idea, how do you narrow that into a worthwhile experience that the audience of this game can easily jump into? I think that's the key problem I have with Creature from the Krusty Krab. Its concept is almost too good. It was so good and freeing that I think it was just too much to try to squeeze into a Spongebob game of this size. If Blitz Games were given the time and funding of, say, your typical 3D Mario title, I think they could have gone all the way with this concept and would have made a truly unforgettable experience. But this is real life, and this is a licensed children's game from the mid-2000s that we're talking about, so no such thing was ever given to one of those games back then. But after hearing about not just Chester's thoughts, but the hundreds of comments I get praising this game, loving this game, appreciating all of its intricate charms, I can't help but have this strange respect and even nostalgia for this game. As I mentioned before, when I was a kid, I did enjoy it, more so than certain Spongebob games I actually prefer over it nowadays. I have fond memories of making it to Plankton's second level for the first time and crushing the citizens of Bikini Bottom with my stubby toes. I adored sprinting through the comic book oozing downtown area as a chubby starfish superhero. I even enjoyed finishing the game on some console where the music in the final cutscene never played like it was supposed to. Even though I don't love the game nearly as much as I did before, I do have a soft spot for it just because it is a remnant of my childhood. And after hearing what Chester and you all have said about this game, I also recognize that it represents a child's imagination, and just how far we can take it should we choose to. And for that, I applaud Creature from the Krusty Krab for exuding those qualities and traits. It may be a flawed game, but it certainly has its place in the childhood catalog. Well, the only thing left to address is, how am I gonna get out of my apartment? A shout out to Team Rat Sign Gamer, Desiree Webb, Glitched Alphin, New Gamer Hub, Reese Gaming, Andrew Coughlin, and my newest patron, Abraham Muner. These are my patron/YouTube members. If you want to become a YouTube member or a patron and get access to a whole bunch of different perks, like seeing this review in particular early, then please check out the links in the description box below. But alright, this is Riders, riding out.